Barbara Jane Nantais was born on September 28, 1962, in Los Angeles County, California. In the summer of 1978, she was a 15-year-old high school sophomore from Lakewood, California, recently named to her school's varsity cheerleading squad. Smart, outspoken, and strong-willed, Barbara was one of 4 siblings. She had 2 sisters named Lorraine and Sue, and a younger brother named Tom. Her sister Sue introduced her to Jim Alt, a 17-year-old Long Beach student described by friends as the life of the party. The two quickly became close, and that summer decided to go on a beach camping trip together. On the evening of August 12, 1978, Barbara and Jim joined friends, 19-year-old Rick Selga and his girlfriend, at Torrey Pines State Beach, a scenic stretch north of La Jolla in San Diego. Around 9:30 p.m., Barbara and Jim went down to the beach to sleep near Lifeguard Tower 7, while Rick and his girlfriend stayed in the parking lot, sleeping in a station wagon. Barbara and Jim zipped their sleeping bags together and drifted off in each other's arms, unaware of the horror to come. By morning, Jim woke up on the beach covered in blood, Barbara nowhere to be found. He staggered back to the vehicle and knocked on Rick Selga's window, his face so mutilated that Rick only recognized him by his blonde hair. The first thing he said to Rick was, "Go find Barb." Rick ran to the beach and quickly found Barbara's body. She had been savagely beaten, sexually assaulted, and strangled to death. Her mouth was stuffed with sand, her body dragged across the beach and left spread eagle. She was naked, her necklace still around her neck, and one of her breasts had been nearly severed with a sharp object. Jim had suffered a severe head injury after being bludgeoned with a rock and a log from the fire pit. He underwent emergency surgery and spent days in a coma. When he regained consciousness, he had no memory of the attack. Due to the severity of his injuries, police ruled him out as a suspect, but the trauma would follow him for life. To this day, he still carries a metal plate in his skull and struggles with the weight of what happened. Barbara's parents, Ralph and Judy Nantais, were devastated. They were out of town at the time, unaware that Barbara had gone camping. Despite an extensive investigation, evidence was limited. The outdoor crime scene complicated evidence collection, and DNA technology was still decades away. Over time, the San Diego Police Department tested nearly every piece of evidence collected from the beach. 3 sleeping bags, 3 rocks from the fire pit, a cigarette butt, fingernail scrapings, and swabs from Barbara's body were all examined. Testing revealed DNA from Jim Alt and a separate couple who had previously used one of the sleeping bags. Several items showed low-level, unidentifiable DNA mixtures. In 2012, DNA was found on a cigarette butt located near Barbara's body. That DNA belonged to an unknown male and was entered into the CODIS database, but it has not yet resulted in a match. In 2014, San Diego police turned to the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, VICAP, for help. The FBI identified 3 unsolved cases with eerie similarities. 2 women in San Diego's East County, 22-year-old Donna Gentile and 25-year-old Marcia Funderburk, were murdered in 1985, both with gravel or sand stuffed into their mouth. And a Jane Doe murdered in Long Beach in 1974 had also been dragged across the sand. That case was linked to Gary Stamp, who confessed to the murder but died of cancer in custody before facing trial. However, no compelling evidence was found to directly link those murders to Barbara's case. Another potential link emerged 6 years after Barbara's death. On August 24, 1984, 14-year-old Claire Huff, visiting her grandparents in San Diego, was found murdered on the very same beach. Her body, like Barbara's, showed signs of strangulation, sexual assault, and mutilation, including a severed breast and sand packed into her mouth. She had been visiting from Rhode Island and was known as a kind-hearted mediator who loved 1980s rock music. Despite the strong similarities between the 2 murders, the families of Claire and Barbara didn't know about each other until decades later, when the San Diego Cold Case Unit publicly suggested that the 2 girls may have been killed by the same person. In 2012, Claire's preserved evidence was retested, and a major breakthrough followed. DNA found on her body matched two men, Ronald Tatro, a violent convicted sex offender from Tennessee, and Kevin Brown, a former San Diego police lab technician. Investigators theorized that the two men might have known each other and possibly met at a strip club. Unfortunately, Tatro died in a 2011 boating accident. Brown, on the other hand, whose DNA was found in microscopic amounts, had worked in the crime lab at the time of Claire's murder. When they spoke with his supervisor, they discovered some interesting information. First of all, his nickname was Kinky, and he was well known for his love of strip clubs. He was also known for doing photo shoots with scantily clad women. One of his employees had caught him watching inappropriate adult content while at work, and another recalled him laughing out loud while he read a report on a very vicious sexually motivated homicide. Tatro was ultimately ruled out in Barbara's case because he was in prison when she was murdered, but remains a suspect in Claire's death. As for Brown, his wife Rebecca insists he was innocent and that the lab may have accidentally contaminated the evidence. But the supervisor noted that Brown never worked on the Claire case, making it impossible for contamination. Investigators then discovered that Brown was 5 hours away in Sacramento on the day of Barbara's murder, ultimately ruling him out. This also leads to another theory that two different killers murdered Claire and Barbara. Was one of the killers Brown? In 2014, investigators went to Brown's house and questioned him. He denies knowing Tatro, but when showed a photo of Claire, he immediately recognizes her. At this point, he has no clue he's a suspect. He then tells detectives that he remembers meeting two women from out of town and that one of their names was Claire. Brown then shocked detectives when he says the two had sex together. However, his wife claimed that Brown was talking about two different girls because Brown said these girls were in their 20s, not teenagers, and had a hotel room and a rental car. Claire, on the other hand, was much younger and was staying with her grandparents. Investigators then request an alibi from Brown, but at this point it had been 30 years, and he claims he can't remember that day, which is very possible. Friends and family describe Brown as a shy, nervous, and introverted individual who could never hold a secret like that for 30 years. Brown also admitted that if he had done something to that magnitude, he would have confessed immediately. According to Brown's wife, the questioning by detectives basically turned his life upside down. He stopped eating and began to lose weight. He became so distracted, he got into 2 car accidents, and with the possibility of being arrested and the fear of going to jail, it all became too much. On October 20th, 2014, when his wife, Becky, returned home, she found a Bible open in the kitchen, turned to the book of Psalm, to a page that speaks of being wrongly accused. She then called out to Brown and called his cell phone, but he was nowhere to be found. The following day, authorities found Brown in the woods, dead. It was ruled that he took his own life. To this day, Barbara's family is not convinced of the two-killer theory and believes one killer was responsible for both murders, which, if true, rules out Brown. San Diego police continue to meet annually with Barbara's family and Jim Alt to provide updates. Barbara Nantais' story is one of a young life stolen far too soon. She was loved deeply by her family and friends and is remembered as vibrant, stubborn, and full of potential. Every year, on the anniversary of her death, Jim Alt returns to the beach to honor her memory. Barbara was murdered in the early hours of August 13, 1978, and as of April 2025, this case remains unsolved. Beth Ellen Vinson was born on February 16, 1977, and grew up in Grantham, North Carolina. At 17, she was full of life and described as a fun, sweet, and outgoing individual who had dreams of becoming a Broadway dancer in New York City. This goal is what ultimately fueled her decision to leave home in July of 1994. To save money for her move, Beth Ellen began working for an escort service in Raleigh, North Carolina, claiming she was 18. Through mutual acquaintances, she was introduced to students from North Carolina State University and moved in with them at the Avery Close Apartments. She eventually started dating one of the men, Ricky Heath. On August 16, 1994, Beth Ellen received a call for an escort job. She told Ricky not to worry and that she'd be fine. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Around 2:30 a.m., she left for the appointment, but never made it. Roughly 3 hours later, her white 1990 Mazda 626 was found abandoned on Hodges Street in Raleigh, near the former location of Big Boss Brewery. The engine was running, the radio was on, the driver's door was open, and one of her shoes was on the driver's side floorboard. Tragically, 7 days later, on August 23, 1994, her body was discovered beneath a piece of cardboard in a drainage ditch between two warehouses off Wicker Drive. She had been stabbed numerous times. Her rings, purse, and a New York City keychain she cherished were missing and have never been recovered. Beth Ellen's murder shocked those who knew her and left a deep wound in the community and an enduring mystery. In the nearly 30 years since her murder, no one has been arrested or charged. Despite initial investigative efforts, Beth Ellen's case eventually went cold. However, renewed attention has recently brought hope for justice. Private investigator Matt Duff launched a podcast titled Who Killed Beth Ellen, which explores the circumstances surrounding her death, uncovers new leads, and interviews individuals closely tied to the investigation. In one of the podcast episodes, Duff interviews retired Raleigh police detective Jerry Falk, the third detective to take on the case. Falk focused his attention on the Avery Close apartment complex where Beth Ellen lived. Notably, phone records show a call was placed from Beth Ellen's apartment to a neighboring unit on the night she disappeared. Other late-night calls from her apartment were made earlier in the month, yet nearly all neighbors told police they had never spoken to her, except for one. An intriguing development came from an anonymous letter sent to the Goldsboro Argus newspaper shortly after Beth Ellen's murder. The letter, which surfaced before the public knew she had worked as an escort, hinted at insider knowledge. It also suggested the writer was located in Raleigh at the time, leaving some to believe the letter could have come from someone with first-hand involvement or information. Beth Ellen Vinson was found murdered on August 23, 1994, and as of April 2025, her case remains unsolved. Kelly Allen was born on November 4, 1986, and lived in St. Louis, Missouri, with her mother, Tracy Williams. At just 20 years old, Kelly was a nursing student, described by her family as sweet, goal-focused, and deeply ambitious. To support herself, she worked as a caregiver in a nursing home, but the commute was long, and eventually she began searching for jobs closer to home. In early March 2007, Kelly decided to stay a few days at a female friend's apartment located in the 8600 block of Frost Avenue in Berkeley, Missouri, about a 20-minute drive from her home. While it's unclear exactly why she chose to stay with this friend, possibly just for a change of pace or a break, the short distance made it a reasonable and familiar place for her to spend time. On Tuesday, March 13, 2007, Kelly attended a job interview at a telemarketing company located on Watson Road. The interview went well, so well that she was offered a second interview, scheduled for that Friday, March 16. After the interview, she reportedly spoke with her friend, the one whose apartment she was staying at, and the two made plans to connect later. When the friend returned from work that day, she found Kelly gone. Her belongings, however, including her purse and a $2,000 tax return check, were still at the apartment. At first, this didn't cause alarm. Nothing appeared out of place, and the friend might have assumed Kelly had simply stepped out for a while. It wasn't until Kelly missed her follow-up interview on March 16th that real concern began to mount. The uncashed tax refund check, her absence from an interview she was excited about, and her lack of communication with family, all completely out of character, pointed to something being very wrong. Authorities classified Kelly's disappearance as suspicious and stated that she may be in danger. From the beginning, the circumstances surrounding her disappearance were murky. The last confirmed communication came through a phone call between Kelly and her friend earlier that day when they discussed meeting up later. There is little publicly known about this friend, such as her identity and how long they were friends for. It's also unclear who else was staying at the apartment. There are no confirmed reports indicating whether Kelly left the apartment to meet someone, went for a walk, or had other plans that afternoon. With no witnesses and no surveillance footage released to the public, those final moments of Kelly's known movements remain unaccounted for. In 2012, a glimmer of hope briefly emerged. Kelly's cousin Cody was riding a metro train when he believed he spotted Kelly sitting beside an unknown man. He managed to discreetly snap a photo of the woman before she exited the train. During a family gathering later that year, Cody shared the image with relatives, including Kelly's mother, Tracy. Several family members believed the woman in the picture was indeed Kelly. The photo was turned over to the St. Louis Police Department and investigator Jerry Griffin, but despite close examination, the woman's identity has never been confirmed. Tracy remained adamant that the woman was her daughter. The resemblance was striking, yet others who reviewed the image noted that the woman appeared to be the same age as Kelly was when she disappeared, about 20 years old. If the sighting occurred 5 years after her disappearance, Kelly would have been around 25 or 26 at the time, making some skeptical that the woman in the photo wasn't actually her. Still, the photo has never been conclusively identified, and the identities of both the woman and the man beside her remain unknown. Kelly's mother has never stopped looking for her. Over the years, she has worked tirelessly to raise awareness by passing out flyers and keeping her daughter's story in the public eye. In a 2017 interview with journalist Chandrea Thomas, Tracy mentioned that several other young women, possibly 4 to 6, had gone missing from the same general area as Kelly around the same time. However, it's unclear if any of those cases are directly connected to Kelly's disappearance. Some speculate that she may have stepped outside briefly, possibly to speak with someone she knew or was dating. This theory aligns with similar cases, such as that of Althea Vault, where a missing woman may have left her belongings inside, believing she'd be right back. At the time of her disappearance, Kelly was 5 foot 4 inches, weighed approximately 165 pounds, and had brown hair worn in braids. She had a medium brown complexion and hazel eyes. She also had a distinctive tattoo of a half moon behind her left ear and another tattoo on her left shoulder of a flower and brown eyes. On the day she went missing, she was wearing apple-bottom jeans, a blue blazer, and sparkling silver shoes. Kelly Allen disappeared on March 13, 2007, and as of April 2025, she remains missing, and this case remains unsolved. Sammy Youngblood was born on August 7, 1985, to parents Bob and Julie. At age 18, Sammy was living in Norman, Oklahoma, and enjoyed spending time with his friends. On the night of September 15, 2003, Sammy went out drinking and partying with one of his best friends, Dennis Mitchell. The evening started out like any other, but by the end of the night, it would change the lives of the Youngblood family forever. Sammy and Dennis, along with a 15-year-old girl named Stacia Dusick, went to a party, drank, and socialized. Around 9 p.m., Sammy called his younger sister Michaela to let her know he would be coming home soon. Later that night, the situation turned volatile when Sammy and Dennis got into a fight. Family members suspect that the fight may have been triggered by a romantic rivalry over Stacia. Both Sammy and Dennis had been drinking heavily, which likely fueled the altercation. Dennis and Sammy had been friends for years, but their friendship soured that night. Dennis called Sammy's father, Bob, sometime after 11 p.m. from a convenience store in Noble. He claimed Sammy had hit him 3 times and that he wasn't going to let him get away with it. Dennis told Bob that he had stopped the truck at 108th and Post Oak Road and made Sammy get out. Sammy's worried father went looking for him in the area but couldn't find him. The next morning, on September 16, 2003, a local resident going to work early spotted Sammy's body on the side of Post Oak Road. At 3:36 a.m., they called police and reported the situation. When police arrived, they found Sammy's body closer to 96th Avenue than 108th, in a rural area of southeast Norman. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as blunt force trauma, though the exact weapon or tool used to inflict the fatal injuries remains a mystery. Sammy's skull was severely crushed, with parallel bruising along his face and a dent in his head. His ear was damaged so bad that it had to be sewn back on. The investigation into Sammy's death was met with multiple dead ends, especially with Dennis and Stacia, who refused to cooperate with investigators. Dennis has refused interviews since the outset, and Stacia initially spoke with detectives, but later obtained an attorney and declined to give further statements. Their silence raised suspicions that they were hiding something. When police tried to interview Dennis after the incident, his attorney informed them that he would not be available to talk. In the aftermath of Sammy's death, the investigation uncovered troubling details. Dennis allegedly told witnesses at the convenience store in Noble that he had, and I quote, beat up Sammy. While that might have been true, there were also injuries consistent with falling from a moving vehicle. This led to speculation that Dennis may have thrown Sammy out of the truck to cover up the fact that he beat Sammy to death, but this is only a theory and hasn't been proven. A search warrant was issued to examine Dennis's truck, but nothing was found to directly link it to Sammy's death. Dennis also kept the truck from being searched for several days, giving him ample time to destroy or alter any evidence. Despite these evasions, police gathered physical evidence from the crime scene, but they could not find any DNA linking the crime directly to Dennis or Stacia. As the years went by, Sammy's case grew cold. In 2017, the case was revisited by Norman's cold case investigator, and modern scene reconstruction techniques were used to try and piece together what happened. Despite this effort, no new breakthroughs were made. Julie and Bob Youngblood remain hopeful that someone will come forward with the information that could bring justice for their son. As of now, nearly 2 decades later, Sammy's death remains unsolved, with most people believing that Dennis intentionally or unintentionally murdered him. Sammy Youngblood was found murdered on September 16, 2003, and as of April 2025, this case remains unsolved. Wendy Michelle Bishop was born in June 1981 and lived in the Chisholm community of Montgomery, Alabama at the age of 12. Growing up near the Montgomery Zoo, Wendy's neighborhood wasn't as rough as it is today. Like many kids, she spent her time playing outside with friends and only coming home when the streetlights came on. On the surface, Wendy appeared to be just your typical 12-year-old. She was a member of the school's softball team and involved in many school activities. Her sister, Tanya Bishop, said Wendy loved school, enjoyed spending time with her friends, and had a zest for life. On April 9, 1994, Wendy was at home when she received a phone call around 8 or 9 p.m. A family member answered the phone before handing it to Wendy, and she had a lengthy conversation with the person on the phone. It was later verified that the call came from a payphone at the nearby Winn-Dixie on Lower Wetumpka Road. After the call, Wendy told her grandmother she was heading to the store to meet a friend. Wendy had often walked to the Winn-Dixie with her sister and friends to grab a drink or a snack, as the store was open until 10 p.m. The caller, believed to be a female friend, had likely been to the grocery store with Wendy before, but on this night, a horrible tragedy would occur. After leaving the store, Wendy never arrived home. Her father initially thought she was simply hanging out with friends and would return soon, but he had no way of knowing he would never see his daughter alive again. After being reported missing, a year would go by before there was a break in the case. In May of 1995, Wendy's skeletal remains were found by a passerby partially buried in the woods in Lowndes County, a significant distance from where she had disappeared. Investigators were unsure whether Wendy was murdered in Montgomery or Lowndes County, where her body was found. Due to the state of decomposition, her remains were essentially skeletal, her tethered clothing barely hanging on to her remains. The case has left the community with lingering questions, and many believe that Wendy's death was the result of a setup. There's a lot of speculation that the killer was actually a group of teens that Wendy knew. It's thought they were potentially harboring a grudge or turned on her unexpectedly. This theory is reminiscent of the tragic case of Skylar Neese, where two close friends killed her simply because they no longer wanted to be friends with her. Some believe that the truth is out there, but someone may be too afraid to come forward. Wendy Michelle Bishop was found murdered in May of 1995, and as of April 2025, this case remains unsolved.